And then he ends with a great question. He starts with a great question. What causes fights and quarrels among you? That's a good question. And then he ends with another really good question. Who are you to judge? Now, we say this all the time, right? And what we mean is, I'm judging you, who are you to judge me? Okay. He's saying this to how many people? Everybody. Do not speak evil against one another. Wow. In my worst moments, I would say, this is true, but is it negative? Is it critical? Is it hurtful? Well, then it's evil. Do not speak evil against who? One another, fellow Christians, brothers, family. How many of you grew up in a family and they had conflict? If you didn't have conflict, you didn't have a family. Families are going to have conflict, but nobody should die or be kicked out of the family or quit the family or set the house on fire. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There's only how many lawgivers? One. Oh, that job's taken? I applied for it. I was hoping. Well, how about judge? Is judge still open? And, oh, really? Judge was filled too. He who is able to save and destroy. Here's his question. His first question was, what causes fights and quarrels among you? His last question is, who are you to judge your neighbor? And the big question is, why do we think that we have the right to be the judge? Because here's what happens in worldly conflict. Something happens and somebody decides, I'll be the judge. And I'll convene a jury and I'll render a verdict. Okay? How many of you have done this? I've done it. Sometimes we convene a jury physically, talk to people. Sometimes we convene a jury digitally, trying to get everybody on our side, whatever the case may be. And what happens when you go to a court, where does the judge sit? The judge sits in the high seat. Okay? So it takes a little pride to get up to the high seat and say, I'll be the judge, I'll sit in the high seat, and I'll convene the jury, and I'll render a verdict, and I'll execute a punishment so that there can be justice. And Jesus walks in the courtroom and is like, what's going on? We're holding court. I didn't get invited. Who's on the bench? Well, they are. I didn't appoint them. In fact, that's my seat. Why are they sitting in my seat? Well, we've rendered a verdict. Jesus said, that's my job. I give the law and I judge. There's only one. There's only one, and that's no one else. That's how worldly conflict goes. Here's how godly conflict goes. Jesus walks in, goes up to the bench. You're dismissed, right? You're now former judge. Sits down, looks at both parties and says, you're guilty. And the other side cheers, yay! And then he says, and you're guilty. I'm like, what? You're all guilty. And the punishment is death. And I'm going to die for you both. So put your spears down. It's not about winning, it's about worshiping. And I'm going to reconcile with them, and I'm going to reconcile with them, and you're going to reconcile with each other. And that's the verdict of the judge. That's godly conflict. Say, where's the justice? At the cross. Well, who's going to pay? Jesus already did.